Ambassador James Jeffrey, former U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, it's my pleasure to host you on American Dialogues.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ambassador, I'd like to start with the current U.S. administration foreign policy. The Trump administration has yet to clarify its position toward the new president of Syria, Ahmad al-Shara. Based on your previous experience as President Trump, special representative for Syria, how should his current administration approach this situation?
Well, I wouldn't say it has ignored President al-Shara. It has had several contacts with him and his people in various international meetings. And secondly, it has given a laundry list of, all in all, fairly reasonable questions and issues it wants the new government to resolve to allow closer contacts, and in particular, the continuation, expansion of waivers of the current sanctions and possible eventual lifting of the sanctions. Those are reasonable. What we're not sure of from the outside is exactly what the United States wants to do with Syria. There are competing views that al-Shara can never be trusted, given his background associated with al-Qaeda. There are views that we have seen him in action for the last decade, and I followed the situation in Idlib very closely when I was the Syria envoy, and we did not see any indication that he was still committed to international terror. So that's the issue. But the problem is Syria is the most important issue in the Middle East today, even compared to the Iranian nuclear account, even compared to Gaza. Syria is where all of the action is. If Syria remains united, stable, and the international community broadly remains united in working with Syria, Iran will not be able to return. The Islamic State will not be able to regain its strength. And much of the horror we've seen in the last 20 years in the region will be over. A new start. That's why it's so important to get Syria right.
So what does the U.S. expect from Syrian new rulers in exchange for support and lifting the sanctions? Is normalization with Israel part of the equation?
I haven't seen the specific requests. I am certain that positive signs and signals towards Israel is important, but I'm pretty sure there isn't a direct ask of recognition. Everybody understands the complicated issues of that, even with countries that we're very close with, such as Saudi Arabia. As I understand it, what the United States is asking is that basically the al-Shara government support efforts to ensure that Syria never becomes a launching pad for threats to the region. That means in various ways facilitating the fight against the Islamic State. That means getting rid of jihadist terrorists who are foreigners, who are still holding powerful positions in the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and now government bureaucracy. That means integrating the SDF with its PKK background into Syria in a way that doesn't threaten Turkey. It means not allowing Iran or Hezbollah back in to threaten Israel and other states, and generally not attacking or mistreating minorities. Those are the requests. Those would seem to be feasible. We also want their help on chemical weapons and finding missing Americans. And there, I believe we are getting help. So I think these are reasonable. And I think that the al-Shara government can take steps in all areas. What we need is, of course, normal exchanges on how and why and when, just like anything else. And we have not had that. And that's basically a continuing reluctance for full engagement on the part of the United States. That's a mistake, and I regret that.
Do you worry that Iran could still destabilize Syrian new leadership by provoking Assad loyalists or trying to mobilize the remaining militias that they have?
Absolutely. The other fear I have is that if al-Shara and the Syrian government and the Syrian people remain crushed under the American sanctions, the Caesar sanctions, and I was involved in setting them up. They weren't set up to hurt the Syrian government. They were set up to punish Assad and push the old Ba'athist government to make the basic reforms that would give us a new Syria. Well, now we have a new Syria, and ironically, the new Syria is being under tremendous pressure from these very same sanctions. My fear is that if al-Shara cannot get support from the West, from Arab states, from America, from international organizations because of these sanctions and the legal problems they create, he will turn to Iran. Not because he likes Iran, he's fought Iran for years, but because he has no other choice. That's the danger here.
So recently there were some reports that the US is withdrawing some of its forces in Syria. How do you see this decision? And if you were in the Trump administration, what advice you would give President Trump?
Well, President Trump rightly closely reviews troop presence all across the board. He was reluctant to keep troops on in Syria in the period 2018, 2019, twice decided we should withdraw them. But in the end, he was convinced that the troops were accomplishing several important missions, not just containing what was left of the Islamic State in the Baqiyada Desert and in the Northeast, but also holding terrain and blocking the advance of Assad, the Iranians, and Russia. Now, it's a new situation. That second mission is basically over, but nonetheless, we still have the residual mission of fighting the Islamic State. And more importantly, we have a situation of uncertainty. Withdrawing some troops is not going to have any impact on their role. And right now, I don't know of a country, with the exception of Iran, that wants the American troops to leave. Not Turkey, not Israel, not even the Russians. Nobody, because they are a force for stability, and nobody wants instability in Syria right now. Look at what we went through, what you went through, what the region went through for the last 14 years.
So, given the shifting dynamics on the ground, what strategies would you recommend to prevent terrorist groups from exploiting the transition in Syria?
Okay, one, the international community has to be united. Right now, surprisingly and commendably, it is. The Arab states, Turkey, Europe, the UN, and international organizations all are adopting the same open hand approach to the al-Shara government, and that's good. The United States is uncertain, and Israel also seems to be uncertain, and of course has seized some territory along the Golan Heights. I think it is important to restore total unity among all of the international community. That's the first step. The second one is work with the government to deal with the security threats that emanate from the country or could emanate from the country, because there's been so many. The Turks are afraid of the PKK. The Israelis are Jordanians of Hezbollah, and the Iranians, everybody, the Islamic State. I mean, this was the war that was creating problems for the whole region. So let's work with this government to deal with those. And thirdly, build it up economically. That is the lesson I think we should take from the bad and good experiences over the past 14 years.
So I want to move to regional countries' role. Saudi Arabia and Qatar announced they will repay the Syria debts to the World Bank. How do you view this move, and what role should regional states play?
I am delighted. The regional states were critical to our strategy in the last Trump administration. We had a small group that worked with us on the Syrian problem. It included Egypt, the Saudis, and the Jordanians, and we were able to maintain general unity. The Emiratis at times shifted and tried to embrace Assad, not because they liked him, but because they thought that would be the way to convince Assad to throw the Iranians out. We disagreed with that. And of course, it didn't happen. You know the history. In the Biden administration, the Arab League invited Assad back. He did nothing in return. He did nothing against the Iranians. He continued his horrible policies against his own people. And the result is today. I welcome what the Saudis and Qataris have done. I think the Arabs are playing an extremely important role. I urge them to use their very significant influence with the Trump administration to push the Trump administration towards Syria. Donald Trump listens to his Arab friends. Donald Trump will listen to them on Syria if they put that at the top of the agenda. If it's issue number 5 or 6, he won't put any attention into it.
You were an ambassador to Iraq, and a big portion of the Iranian influence still exists there in Iraq. What is your outlook for the future of Iraq in relation to Syria?
I am the most optimistic I've been in many years. First of all, Prime Minister al-Sudani has shown himself to be a real Iraqi patriot. He's trying to bring in all elements of Iraq, not just the Shia Arab majority. He's working closely with other Arab states, including with economic and energy ties, and that's important. I'll come back to that. He's working well with the United States. He clearly is trying to find a way to keep United States forces on in Iraq beyond 2026, not just because there's still a minor threat from the Islamic State, but frankly, as a balance. He has worked closely with us and with Turkey to resolve the remaining problems with the shipment of oil out of northern Iraq, the Kurdistan Regional Government area, into Turkey, and that's very, very important. And he has embarked on a major gas and electricity development program with American, French, and other Western firms that will reduce dramatically Iraq's dependency on Iranian gas and electricity, which is the first step towards weaning it from Iranian control politically. In addition, ever since the change in Syria, he has seen that he no longer has Iran on his eastern side and an Iranian ally on his western side. Rather, he has to ensure good relations with Syria. And you notice how many steps he has taken. He has welcomed the Syrian government. He is inviting them to Baghdad. This is against the will and the interests of the Iranians. So I'm very optimistic here.
So currently, there are fears among Arabs, especially, that while Iranian influence in Syria is waning, Turkish influence is rising. Given President Trump's recent praise for Erdogan, notably calling him smart guy for taking over Syria, do you foresee Trump encouraging further Turkish influence in Syria?
Not influence. I think that Trump wants to see an independent Syria, and he gives Turkey a great deal of credit for that. He should have given himself more credit because, frankly, it was the policies that the Trump administration put in place, including a dramatic Trump public message in September of 2018 as the Iranians, the Russians, and Assad were going to attack Idlib, not to do that. It was very strong. It was followed up by Pompeo calling Lavrov and other actions we took. We were pumping aid into Idlib for the displaced people there, but also to show that we did not want to see Idlib fall. President Trump was responsible for that. He was responsible for keeping the troops on. He was responsible for supporting a large coalition to keep pressure on Assad. Those policies, albeit less enthusiastically, were continued by the Biden administration, and they contributed to Assad's collapse.
So given that, why do you think President Trump is still hesitant to have, a real policy towards Syria now, especially like there's a vacuum now? Russian or
I would say the vacuum, it's not a complete vacuum because we actually do have a policy, which is this set of requests and But I say you're as close to a vacuum as America ever has on an important issue. I would say that because there is a division. Many in the United States government in various places want to move forward and follow the policies that I've just sketched out. There are others who fear the rise of terrorism in Syria. Either they don't trust al-Shara, given his past, or they fear that al-Shara won't be strong enough to resist terrorist elements. Therefore, they've given him some tests. So I think that until this gets resolved, you will still see a bit of a vacuum. I believe, though, that it is slowly changing because one of the influences on the counterterrorism people is Israel, and Israel has changed its position in minor ways in the last few weeks. That is, it has met with the Turks in Baku, and that's very important to at least do deconfliction of their military forces, because they both have military forces in Syria. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to Azerbaijan. That's very important because what you're seeing is an alliance of Israel, Syria, Turkey, Azerbaijan to block Iranian influence. That is good for the region, good for Israel, good for Syria, good for Turkey, good for Azerbaijan, and good for the Arab states. I know Turkey very well. I understand there are always concerns, be it Israeli or Arab, about Turkish influence in the Arab world, but I don't see this as a major. Turkey isn't the replacement of Iran. It is mainly focused on Europe, be it the culture of the country, the orientation of the people of Turkey, and their economic ties. It is a very advanced economy, and who is its number one trading partner? The Europeans. Second, Russia. It has major security concerns to its northeast in the Caucasus, north, Black Sea, Russia, Ukraine, and northwest, the Balkans. And I just don't see it being a replacement to the kind of serious ideological, religious, and military threat that Iran was in the region. It needs to be dealt with as a serious player, but beyond that, I don't see a problem.
One fear that I saw, especially among the Syrians I talked with, is the foreign fighters. Do you think the current Syrian government is going to be able to dismantle their power?
Which fighters?
The foreign fighters among the...
I think it will have to.
It will have
First of all, some of them are Uyghurs, and there will be pressure from the Chinese. The Chinese can help Syria a lot. It holds a veto in the UN Security Council, thus can limit the lifting of sanctions and other efforts to help Syria. It also is a major economic and trade partner throughout the Middle East. It can influence countries that it has deep relations with, the Emiratis, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and it can directly help or hurt Syria. So that's important. But beyond that, these other fighters have to get removed from their positions. At this point, I don't think there's any demand, at least from us, that they be sent back to the countries that they came from, because many of them would be ill-treated. The question is, why should they be commanding forces in Syria right now? They're not Syrian. The same thing is true, and we have made this point clear, as have the Turks, with non-Syrian people who are in upper levels of the SDF or the YPG or in the end the PKK in Syria. They have to go as well.
Do you think that Shara fear of an attempt on his life, and that's why he's hesitant to deal with this file?
I think there are many people who would like to see him removed. He is a gift to Syria in his military capabilities, in his wisdom so far in dealing with a very difficult situation. Look at how he handled the fighting in Latakia. As you know, that started with a terrorist assault on his forces by remaining Baathists. But that led to many irregular forces, as well as the Syrian army, retaliating, including against civilians in the Alawite areas of Syria. And what has happened since? He stopped that action. He has tried to reach out. there hasn't been a repeat. That's the kind of thing, as you know, we usually don't see in the Middle East. We see an incident like that, and we wait a week and we see a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. We all lived through that in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and other places.
So I want to move to the wider Middle East dynamics. On April 17th, Saudi Arabia Defense Minister visited Tehran and met with the Supreme Leader, which signaled improvement and progress in Saudi-Iranian relations. How do you assess these dynamics?
It's normal diplomacy. I read nothing much in it. First of all, the Saudis and Iranians are both members of OPEC, and they have certain common oil interests. Secondly, it simply makes sense for the Saudis to have a channel, be it direct or indirect through the Omanis, through the Iraqis, whatever, to Iran to tell the Iranians where they are. I do not see any commonality of interests. Saudi Arabia and Iran are the main competitors for, if you will, the soul of the Muslim community in the Middle East. And that hasn't changed. In addition, the Saudis see Iran as a military and aggressive threat to the region. And that's why, in many ways, they have helped us over the past year and a half in deterring and containing and defeating Iran.
When President Trump visits Saudi Arabia in May, do you expect he will seek to support or undermine this regional reconciliation with Iran?
Oh, he won't have any problem with it per se, because he knows it doesn't mean a shift. Look, everybody thinks that every diplomatic development, every exchange of letters, a foreign minister meeting is another Nixon goes to China. And China changes the whole Cold War history by going from ally of the Soviet Union to ally of America. That's not what's happening here. Trump is himself trying to reach out to Iran and get a deal. He will look to the Saudis to reinforce that in their communications with Iran, and why not? It's a good thing.
What kind of a deal between the US and Iran Ambassador James Jeffrey would support?
I would support something not too different from the JCPOA in 2015, except there has to be much more dramatic and permanent restrictions on enrichment, either no enrichment or very low level enrichment, and it has to be permanent. That's the first thing. Second, Iran has to do more to clarify its past research into atomic weapons building and the weaponization of missiles to carry atomic warheads. We know they did this. I was in charge of the portfolio in the White House in 2007 when we first got the information. And as you know, the Israelis went and took a whole warehouse of that information from Tehran a few years ago. So we now are sitting on top of it. We cannot let the Iranians off the hook on that. They were planning on building a missile. They were planning on building a nuclear warhead. They have to explain what they were doing, and they have to give us assurances that that is all in the past.
There were rumors of a Trump-Shara meeting in Riyadh. How realistic is this, and would direct engagement with Syria serve U.S. interests in this time?
Direct engagement with Syria would. You can see, look what happened in Rome the other day. Trump spends 15 minutes with Zelensky, and the whole dynamic of the Ukraine war has changed, okay? Sure.
So you support this, I think. Okay, and
Absolutely.
if you are, just in front of Trump now, what would you tell him on Syria?
I would say the Middle East, thanks to American power, Israeli, Turkish, and Arab over the past year and a half, has defeated the major threat to security over the past 20 years, Iran. You are at a moment like after the Yom Kippur War in 1973 or after Kuwait liberation in 1991. You can shape the Middle East in a way that will provide peace and prosperity to the people of the region and security for the wider world, including the United States. No more terrorism, no more nuclear weapons, no more refugee flows. But you have to seize this occasion, continue to work in integrating Israel and the Arabs, that includes movement on the Palestinian issue, and work to ensure that Syria remains united, strong, and that the international community is speaking with one voice to Damascus. That's my message.
Ambassador James Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.